Oh, that's it. I'm gonna report this to me member of parliament. Hey, Gus! I got something to report to you.
That's a bloody outrage, it is. I want to take this all the way to the Prime Minister. Hey, Mr. Prime Minister!
Fam, okay, important shit going down.
So, there are two times where you probably heard about the Australian Parliament. The
Yes.
first was when our very respected Member of Parliament, Barnaby Joyce, threatened to kill Johnny Depp's dog.
Yes, you did.
Mr. Depp has to either take his dogs back to California or we're going to have to euthanize them.
The second time was about all the Prime Ministers we've had recently.
Yes, and probably the third time you've ever heard of Australia is, of course, that Simpsons episode.
That's true. But it turns out our Parliament has actually done something right for like the first time ever when it comes to video games.
Pretty
Because
much.
Australian government is just the absolute worst when it comes to video games.
Yep.
So, would you say it's time for everyone to panic? Yes, I would.
We ban all of the games.
Mortal Kombat was banned for a while.
Grand Theft Auto, Manhunt, you still can't buy it here. Bully had to be redone.
Yeah.
Hotline Miami 2, you can't buy it. We're like fucking back in the Stone
Yes.
Age. But it turns out in the fight against loot boxes, we're actually quite avant-garde.
Avant-garde we are.
We are leading
We are
the
ahead
charge.
of the curve now, people.
And this is today one of the most damning findings in relation to loot boxes and problem gambling that you've seen anywhere in the world. The laymen bring you the juicy Australian perspective right here, mate.
Okay, guys, so we've seen, of course, Belgium has made the first move, okay, in the courting ceremony between loot boxes and law, okay?
Court.
Courting ceremony?
Court.
Thank you very much. Then Finland jumped in too, okay? Belgium wasn't alone. We had Finland looking into it. And, you know, it seems like now we've got the mother country for us also looking into it. There's been a very, very damning report that's actually come out. It only came out, I think, yesterday or something.
No, it came out today.
Came out today, okay? This is fresh off the presses for Le Monde
The
Gaumont.
Australian presses.
Okay, the Australian presses.
The committee that was making this report was convened back in June. They've been reporting on it ever since then. They've just tabled their final report now. It's pretty damning. These are the words. The outcome of the investigation is summarized as follows. Our large-scale study of 7,422 people found important links between loot box spending and problem gambling. The more severe gamers' problem gambling was, the more likely they were to spend large amounts of money on loot boxes. The results strongly support claims that loot boxes are psychologically akin to gambling. These results also suggest that there is a serious risk for loot boxes to cause gambling-related harm. More specifically, they suggest that either loot boxes act as a gateway to problem gambling amongst gamers, and loot boxes provide gaming companies with an unregulated way of exploiting gambling disorders among their customers. That is huge.
Boom.
That is literally the strongest language we have ever seen from any government-related entity when it comes to loot boxes. What they did was, what they're basically saying is there was a study that was done, and they found that if you are a problem gambler, you have a problem with gambling, you are way more likely to spend big dollars on loot boxes because it's tapping into the same shit in your brain.
Yep, and I mean, it was also really saying it's a perfect gateway to gambling also. So even if you're not a gambler, you're going to end up a gambler because if you just love this loot box shit. So there's a lot of things that it was saying there.
And this is critical as well because we know with loot boxes, kids are using this shit, man. Like FIFA Ultimate Team, which I believe is the biggest, worst enemy when it comes to microtransactions and all that sort of shit. Like FIFA Ultimate Team generates $1 billion a year for EA. A lot of the people spending money on that are kids who are playing FIFA and they want to be able to beat their friends and whatever else. That shit is just straight up loot boxes and gambling. And this report right here is saying that they did a study and they found there is a clear link. Now, we've been saying this forever. The laymen have been all over this for days, man. We were covering this shit back from fucking God knows when.
Yeah, I know the rebuttal to this has actually been things along these lines. You'll see this in the article. Things like, it's the same as getting trading cards, or it's the same as getting a Kinder Surprise toy, because you get something, but it's clearly not like that, because they actually went on to say
industry statements typically disassociate loot boxes from gambling. They instead highlight similarities between loot boxes and harmless products like trading cards or Kinder Surprise. As the ESRC puts it, we do not consider loot boxes to be gambling. Loot boxes are more comparable to baseball cards, where there is an element of surprise and you always get something. By contrast, researchers argue that loot boxes share so many formal similarities with other forms of gambling that they meet the psychological criteria to be considered gambling themselves. These researchers further suggest that buying loot boxes may therefore lead to problem gambling amongst gamers. I mean,
Yep.
that's it. It just addresses it right there. It's basically saying that is not a fair comparison. And like basic common sense indicates that this is not the case.
100%.
Anyone that actually has played these games, seen what these loot boxes are, can clearly see the difference between buying a packet of cards and FIFA Ultimate Team.
Yeah, I was gonna say, even if people that have never actually played games, but they're just explained in detail what these actually are and what they are doing for young children in terms of, changing the brain circuitry, getting them ready for gambling. It's just so easy to see that, of course, it's a no-no. It's a complete no. And finally, Australia is giving them the boot.
Exactly
okay?
right. So those are the findings of the report, and then the report actually concludes with some recommendations, and this is what they say. Given the relationship between loot box use and problem gambling outlined above, we recommend that games containing loot boxes carry parental advisories. Fine, that's standard, whatever. Games containing loot boxes carry descriptors that they indicate the presence of in-game gambling content, which is a definite escalation of language.
Yep.
And then finally, serious consideration is given to restricting games that contain loot boxes to players of legal gambling age. Now that is the ball game. Right
That is
there.
the ball game. I was surprised that they were even listing let's just put a stamp on the actual game itself.
Yeah.
I think that the only solution to this is, of course, if you are under 18 in Australia, if you are under 21 in America, then absolutely it's off the table. For them to even say that it should be,
labeled.
It should be labeled.
But I think that they're saying that as well as. So,
Sure.
that also means that adults can decide, yes, I've seen this product clearly labeled, and I'm going to be able to say there's gambling in this, I don't want to buy this product. So I think
100%. I thought it sounded like they were saying these are the recommendations of how we think that we may move forward in terms of one category.
Yeah.
If it's a multiple categories, then yes, definitely.
But restricting the availability of these games to kids is, honestly, it's, as I said, it's the ball game. Because, right, FIFA, for example, would no longer be able to sell itself and advertise itself to children.
Yeah.
That's a huge portion of their market. Like, it's just massive, you know?
Yeah.
Like, at that point, EA is going to have to think long and hard. They're going to say, are the potential loss of game sales worth having the microtransactions in there if we can only market it and sell it to adults?
Yeah.
And at that point, they're really going to have to think very carefully about that.
The only other way that I can think they get around that is they actually literally create two different copies. One for adults, one for children.
Yeah, well, they could do that. What they could do is they could just have the normal FIFA game, which is just the sports game, and then they could have a separate version where you buy FIFA Ultimate Team included in it, and that's the adult version.
Yeah.
There's lots of ways that EA are going to be able to get around it, but the point is that if something like this starts getting up in the Australian Parliament, there's no reason it couldn't get up somewhere else. In fact, just today, EU gambling regulators co-signed a letter expressing very serious concerns about loot boxes as well, calling them a huge gambling issue. Like basically saying that this is a problem and we are monitoring this very closely. So it's not just Australia doing this today. It's like National Loot Box Destruction Day.
It really is. And I mean,
EA's favourite day.
I was surprised because when we were thinking last year, was this going to really tumble down as much as we wanted it to?
Yeah.
There was a small part of me was like, maybe this is too big. We need too many people to rally together.
Yeah.
We need too many signatures. We need too much stuff to actually happen. But it really looks like it's actually happening now. We've got multiple countries, doing their own investigations, trying to pass laws. We had Chris Lee last year, actually, at the end of last year, really pushing in Hawaii to put certain laws in to protect children with loot boxes and stuff. I mean, it just looks like it's all slowly happening now.
Which is exciting because, to be honest, this stuff is garbage, and I really believe it'll be the death of the games industry if this is not curbed. Like, if the games industry becomes this big fat parasite living off problem gamblers to sustain itself, and that's the only way it can see itself growing and making a sustainable return on investment, then I think this industry is doomed.
I agree.
So the fact that this is happening is, I just think, such a good thing.
I think there's always going to be a gaming industry, but it will be...
Yeah, absolutely.
Of course, but in terms of it would just be a cesspool of just like absolute
to the pokies.
garbage games, and 90% of the games that would come out would be based on if you can pay for it, you can play it.
Which is exactly what the mobile games market is
Exactly
right now.
right.
It is a terrible cesspool of garbage. 98% of what is released out there is microtransaction shit. And I honestly believe that if this is not stamped out, the core gaming industry is going to end up in very, very similar states.
It would be
in years to
worse than
come.
mobiles because right now it's free, but at the moment you're still paying 60, 70 bucks for these games, then paying for Ultimate Team, just like we saw with Battlefront 2. You pay for a full price game, or 2K games. It's all happening already. So these things will hopefully make each developer and publisher go, okay, we can't do that anymore. The jig is up.
So good on you, Australia. We're proud of you.
Thank God. Thank God. We are
right.
maybe also leading the charge now in this, because this does need to stop.
Crocodile Dundee, the Crocodile Hunter.
He's coming for you.
Rip. Vegemite.
Yeah.
Australia, we've done some good things.
Yeah,
we're adding this one to the pile.
We don't own Vegemite anymore.
That's sad. Why'd you have to ruin?
Sorry, I
the video,
ruined that,
Sam?
guys.
Rip Vegemite.